This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
From the rough streets of the south side of Chicago to here in Colorado Springs, it's been an amazing journey for this young man. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. I'm not speaking to myself, of course, because I no longer qualify as a young man, and I'm from the north side of Chicago. We met this gentleman sitting to my right here at the Prophecy Watchers 2022 Homeward Bound Conference. We're at the Colorado Springs Marriott. If you hear some background noise here, it's because we're in the lobby right now. Things are winding down here at the conference. Most of the folks are headed home. Some of the speakers still having dinner in the hotel cafeteria, the hotel restaurant just to our right. But sitting next to me is a gentleman who met us in the lobby as we arrived here on Thursday afternoon and told us a remarkable story. And God bless Bob Ulrich of Prophecy Watchers for opening the door to get you into the conference because this conference was a sellout. But we explained to Bob what was going on, and Bob said, sure, just go see Chris, we'll get him in. And he's got a remarkable story. Without further ado, Shawn Rae. Shawn, welcome to A View from the Bunker.
It's a pleasure. Absolutely a pleasure.
Your story is remarkable. Some people would hear it and think, this just can't be real. This is a made-for-television movie. This is a... But,
I've been told that before.
But you have walked down some roads that many of us only ever read about or see in the news. How did you get from, well, your backstory, how did you get from birth, Chicago, and what did you get into in Chicago then that makes your story unique?
Yeah, well, I was originally born in Norwalk, Connecticut. My mother was very young, teenager, 15, 16 years old. My father was in his 20s at that time. This was about 1985. I was born December 9th, 1985, Norwalk, Connecticut. But my father at that time had lived a pretty rough past himself and led him to drugs and alcohol, and it bled into the home. And you know, by the time I was born, the way that I picture it is my mother was really struggling with that, and brought a lot of heaviness and a lot of hurt and pain. And my mother decided to leave Norwalk, Connecticut when I was 2 and moved to Illinois. When I first moved to Illinois, it was actually outside of Chicago to a little town called Prophetstown. And it's more towards the east side of Illinois, or sorry, west side of Illinois. And that's where I lived in an apartment, and my grandma was helping us, you know, at the time. And I was extremely rebellious at this point already, and I know now it had a lot to do with, you know, just leaving my father, and you know, was very confused, you know, and being so young, I look back and I know that I was really confused. And I just took it out on everybody. I took it out on my mother mainly because, you know, that was my mom. And, you know, there's so many stories of just, you know, me doing just all types of rebellious things, from grabbing milk cartons out of the fridge and slamming them on the ground, and, you know, pulling eggs out and just throwing them at,
So your father wasn't in the picture?
My father was not in the picture at this time. Like I said, my mom took me from my father, and I have no remembrance before the age, you know, not even around the age of 2, but all I remember is living in this little town called Prophetstown, and that's where I kind of spent the more younger years of my life. And I had already started getting in trouble on the streets and stuff like that, and was really rebellious on the streets, and always ran away from my house. My mother couldn't keep me in the house. You know, she was real young, so she was still struggling with her own stuff, and a lot of men would come in and out the house, and it frustrated me a lot and made me want to rebel even more because it wasn't my father. And so the streets became my dad, even from the small town that I was living in, which eventually I got locked up doing stuff on the streets, and I eventually moved to South Chicago. And that's where it really started for me, is when I moved to what was called 18th Street and Morgan in South Chicago. It's called Pilsen. And
I'm actually somewhat familiar with that area. Again, I was raised further north, but
sure, you got Pilsen and Little Village, and you know, it's kind of the same. They call it Little Mexico. They like to call it. It's all especially 18th Street.
That's quite a change from Prophetstown. I was trying to remember. That's what I was doing here on the tablet, remembering where Prophetstown was. It's between Sterling and the Quad
Rock
Cities.
Falls and Sterling.
Yeah.
Yep, Dixon area.
But rural Western Illinois.
Yep. Yeah. Cornfields, nothing out
right.
there, you know. So
I'm very familiar with that as well. So quite a change getting into Chicago. And
well,
again, how old were you?
absolutely. And that, and at that time I was, I was a teenager when I moved to Chicago. Before then, I had actually, my mother had a hard time taking care of me, so she left me with my grandparents from the age of about 10 to 11 years old. And so in that time, I actually excelled as a child. And my grandmother was a devout Christian, loved Jesus with all her heart. And she was the one person in my life that I knew that talked about this Jesus, you know, that wasn't going on in my own home, you know. And so my mom had decided to go ahead and let me live with my grandmother from the age of 10 to 11 years old. And so in that time, I went to school, did really good. I excelled in, you know, sports and stuff like that. And my grandmother would take me to church as a child, you know. But I even remember then going to Sunday school and stealing pops out of the pop machine in Sunday school class. And so, you know, I had this complete rebellious spirit that had overtaken me that I didn't until later on find out kind of where that stemmed from. It was very spiritual. It was very generational. And it was very controlling inside of me. And I didn't know, you know, we don't really understand it, you know, at first. And it wasn't until I started running with a gang called the Satan's Disciples on the south side of Chicago. And they are kind of the enforcers of what we would call the folk nation, you know, on the streets on the south side.
And there were two main rival groups in Chicago, the folk nation.
Well, two main nations. You know, the thing about Chicago is it's block against block. It's, you know, you got a lot of the same gangs that war against each other.
Yeah.
You know, and so
I was kind of protected from that as a kid.
Right.
Growing up on,
well, that's the thing. Also, the thing about Chicago, if you're not from the streets, and you know, we used to say things like, "This is for D's, this ain't for those," which means the stuff we do out here on the streets is separate from the way everybody else lives their lives. But you guys get caught in crossfire all the time.
I mean, my main experience of the gangs in Chicago was just seeing the graffiti on the walls. You know, the Vice Lords, the Latin Kings, the Disciples.
The GD Nation was the main nation that ran the folk nation. You know, I'm not going to go into the gang history because it's irrelevant. But I become a part of a gang called Satan's Disciples, and I real quickly started getting involved in the activity on the streets. And so I'm starting to drink some water.
Yeah, you'd think by the name Satan's Disciples, you're wondering, are we the bad guys here?
Yeah, right. Well, we don't really, you know, the thing about that was so seducing about the streets was the knowledge. It was, you know, we like to call each other knowledge buffs coming from the streets, because the access we have to knowledge and information, not just from the streets, but also to the politics and to everything in between, makes us feel superior. You know, you get to where Satan makes you feel like, you know, it feels good to have power and control.
So Satan's Disciples was more than just a name.
Right. Well, the original founder of the Satan's Disciples, King Satan, there's all types of stories and rumors about whether he was a real person. Was he, you know, we know he was a real person. The gang was originally a white gang that started out, and it wasn't until the immigrant migrations and stuff, it's, you know, to the north, where, you know, a lot of blacks, a lot of Mexicans come into the city.
Right.
And that's when we ended up converting from mainly a white gang into a Latin organization.
Right. And a lot of that began even before you were born.
Yes.
Because we moved out of the city in
60s, 70s.
when a lot of that was flipping in the 70s.
Absolutely.
So,
Yep, and there was a reason for that, and why those times and everything and stuff, and so that'll be important down the road, I'm sure. But there's an agenda involved when it comes to the street gangs. You know, there is an organization that has been constructed and has been structured within the gangs since they have been developed. And so, you know, we have gang literatures, gang codes, ways that we shake, ways that we talk to each other, certain things that we say to one another to know who is who, to know you are a real gang member. And
so after a home life that lacked the structure of the design that God created,
right,
of a husband and a wife training up their children, how did suddenly finding this structure in the gang affect you? Why was that appealing?
Oh, wow, because I finally felt like found what I was looking for. Family. You know, because even when I was living in small towns, I was staying at people's houses all the time. I was running away. My mom would lock doors, bolt windows, and I would slip out. And she, you know, started, she would never know. And then eventually I hear her screaming out the window as I'm halfway down the alley, you know, and I didn't care. You know, even at that time, even around the small town of Prophetstown, we had Satan's disciples out there, believe it or not. And so even before I moved to Chicago, I was affiliated with some of the Satan's disciples, even out from Sterling, Rock Falls, Dixon, Prophetstown, Tampico, that area, Morrison, all that. That's all street gang ran too. You know, that's not, you know, it's, that's what I mean. This stuff is shielded by silence and secrecy and by darkness. And but I had already been affiliated with that particular gang even when I was running around Prophetstown. And so by the time I got to where I moved to in Chicago, that was the gang that ran 18th Street. And I, at that point, had already known a lot about the organization, all about the structures and all about the shakes and all about that stuff, that the next step for me was to actually get involved. And once I started to do that, that's when it really, you know, things really started to happen. And I became what's called a sanctioned gang member. And to become a sanctioned gang member, you go through certain criteria, certain steps and levels of you know, different activities you do on the streets. We call it nation business, or, you know, that also bleeds into the connections that you make within the city. And so when you become sanctioned, you all of a sudden become tied into something much bigger than a street gang. And so at that point is when I really saw things for what they really were. It was that level and that access to that information that changed what it meant to be a gang member. I was a part of a brotherhood that consisted of even other gang members from other gangs. And so
one of the things that struck me in just trying to read a little bit about the history of Chicago, because I was born and raised there, was how things have transformed, say, over the last 100 years, where politicians who wanted to make it as aldermen or maybe even, you know, higher inside the machine, the Democratic machine in the city, which really took over about 100 years ago. I think the last Republican mayor in Chicago was Big Bill Thompson around the 1920s. But they would go to the heads of the mafia, you know, a Sam Giancana, even into my era, who was still around then. But before that, guys like, well, Al Capone, if you want to go all the way back to the 20s.
And mind you, he wasn't from Chicago either.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't.
Right.
But that role now is played by the gangs in Chicago, where the politicians go to coordinate activity with the gangs rather than the mob.
And the police. It's all,
well, sure,
you know, it's all orchestrated.
But the spiritual side of this, I mean, again, Satan's disciples hints at something. And there was a darker aspect of this
the
that
tattoo
obviously
itself.
So you're still marked.
The baby devil.
Yeah.
Sticking up a baby angel, throwing up the 5. You know, also have a brand on my right side.
So this led you into some other self-destructive activities.
I'd say so. Yeah. The first time I actually found out, you know, what it meant to be, you know, part of the higher ranking organization, I started getting involved in activities like trafficking, you know.
Human trafficking.
Yeah, well, it started, you know, starts out drugs and stuff like that, but the connections that are on the streets, you know, if you're selling drugs, the thing about the streets is you get an opportunity to get involved in whatever it is that appeals you. So if it just so happens to be drugs, it just so happens to be drugs. thing is about drugs is it's easy money, it's quick money, and it's less of, you can kind of maneuver your way through the drug system. When you start getting into things like trafficking, you're now dealing with something completely different than your typical trafficking of drugs on the streets, because you're dealing with people who are trying to get a hold of things that if anybody gets caught doing, you'll probably never see the light of day again. And thing about drugs is you can go in and out of prison all your life, and but the thing about trafficking is there's more than just trafficking involved in this. You've got a whole supernatural, spiritual side of all of this that deals with what they call the mystery schools and the mystery religions. And
wouldn't expect to hear that connected to the street gangs.
And that's what most people don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the part of things that that I think is very much the hands and feet of the trafficking and the organizations.
Well, Josh,
more so back then, because mind you, the gangs in Chicago are not as structured as they used to be. So there's been they locked up Larry Hoover, who was a 33rd degree Freemason. They locked up Jeff Fort, who was also affiliated with the Brotherhood. And they started locking up all the heads of the gangs around the 80s and 90s, that it brought about a lot of friction on the streets, with territory and everything like that. And so that led to having to reorganize things in kind of a different way. And so that's kind of where the cartels get involved in the city of Chicago. Now, mind you, the cartels are into all type of witchcraft, all type of sorcery,
right.
necromancy, you name it, sending and conjuring of spirits. They pray over their drugs, all these kinds of things.
Yeah. Now we could really dive into that.
Yeah, we could.
Take a long, deep dive, but in the interest of keeping this to a manageable length.
Yeah.
And that's a story that you're going to have to tell. I think that'll be part of your mission and your ministry as you go forward. But
possible.
The activities that you got into, and it led you to getting into drugs.
Yes.
And how did that affect you, and how low did you go?
So I guess what I could say is the drugs came in at a really young age. I guess that was the part I kind of didn't fill you in on, was by the time I was 9 years old, I was already popping Vicodin pills. My mom had a C-section when my brother comes home with a big bottle. Back then, they give you huge bottles of Vicodin. And from the first time I ever popped a Vicodin pill and experienced opiates in my life, it was a wrap. It was the most seducing thing I'd ever met in my life, outside of everything else I was chasing. Because now I was able to numb myself, and I was able to continue to do the rebellious things that I was doing and not have to feel for it, It wasn't until I would get locked up or end up in an institution that, I'm playing the I'm sorry role, And even then, because my grandmother talked about Jesus so much, I'd invoke Jesus. I have stories about that in prison, where Jesus had literally pulled me out of situations where I was just like, I was supposed to die. I should have died. Walk into this jail cell to get beat by this guy that was ready to kill me, through gang activity in the prisons and stuff like that. There's a whole nother realm. That's in a whole nother, avenue that I could get into. But so the drugs, the opiates had always been there from the time I was real young, and that led me not so much to liking alcohol or anything else. Marijuana, of course, it was hand in hand. Marijuana was the first thing I'd ever tried, but it was the opiates that really captivated me. And so this had led me, obviously, all the way to Chicago. By the time I get to Chicago, I mean, I'm testing heroin for the first time, testing it in a way that at that time hadn't completely taken me over. So this was just, okay, this is what we got going on in Chicago. We don't deal with the pills, we got heroin. Okay. So I tried that a little bit, but mind you, I was still able to even maintain and manage, and live a life. Like, addiction had not gotten me yet. And it wasn't until I got locked up again, running around, violating probation. I was actually on parole at that time, and when I was in Chicago, and I violated parole. I get locked up. I get out. I moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota. So this is where the drugs really come into.
Okay, so how old are you about this time?
I am 20 years old.
Okay.
21, maybe going on 22, between 20 and 22 years old at this time. And so
about 2005, 2006?
2005, 2006. I believe it was 2006
okay.
is when this happened. That's when my mom had moved up there. One thing about my mother is she was doing a lot of running, moving. You know, I had I'd never been stable in a house, in a home, never in my life. So even like my mom was struggling, you know, and it just, you know, weighed on me. I struggled, and we hated each other for it. You know, she was so young, I was so young, and we were too close in age, and I'm hanging out with guys way older than me on the streets. That's just, you know, they used to call me the seasoned teenager because I didn't hang out with I had friends my age, but I adopted the elder generation, and you know, that's who raised me. That's you know, it was the elder folks that raised me, because I didn't have a dad, mind you, and my mom was, you know, doing her thing, and so we were never stable, and so my mom is always moving around. By this time, I got out of prison. She's moving to Minneapolis. Says, oh, I'm going to move up here. I got a job working at St. Cloud prison up there, because she worked in the prison system and stuff. She worked at Kewanee prison, the sex offender prison, for a very long time, and led her to Minneapolis, Minnesota. I get out of prison, dating a girl. We moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota. I split up with this girl. I moved to St. Cloud, and I split up with her, ended up moving to Minneapolis. My mom family decided they want to go back to Illinois to be closer to family. So my mom moves back to Illinois. I stay in Minneapolis, Minnesota. At this time, I started getting connections within the strip clubs. And so, because everywhere, I ran the streets most of my life, all my life. And so the first place I look to try to get around is the streets, because I know them too well. And so I'm always adapted, going towards the things that I am, you know, familiar with. And so I end up in the strip clubs, and I start dating a stripper, Minnesota pole princess, a couple years in a row at that time. Not to glorify this life at all, because this is what destroyed me. I thought I was on top of the world. Next thing you know, I'm meeting DJs, you know, well-known DJs in Minneapolis.
Big music scene.
Big music city. I mean, in that life, that was the one place I had the most fun, was in the city of Minneapolis. You know, it was like a little mini Sin City in the Midwest, if you want to say, because strip clubs every corner.
Right.
You know, they got a place called Sex World downtown. You know, it runs like a whole block. And I started getting involved with the DJ scene at Deja Vu right across the street. And so I start dating this stripper, and next thing you know, I'm, you know, living in an apartment, and I'm hanging out with strippers all the time, you know, and I'm meeting the DJs. I start DJing a warehouse up in North Minneapolis, and I started drawing a bunch of people through my music and stuff, and doing DJing and stuff, and that became super cool. Well, that didn't last long. Mind you, I'm addicted to pills. So this had been in and out of my life since the whole time I'd ever been out of an institution or prison. I'm popping pills and I'm doing drugs. And so I can't find pills, and I'm starting to deal with stomach issues at this point. You know, come to find out, I had been dealing with what they thought was Crohn's at that time. Really, I think it was just me burning up the lining in my stomach through all the pills I was popping and the drugs I was doing. And I started dealing with a lot of stomach problems. So one night, we're at one of the strippers' houses, and she had been like a decade-long heroin addict. She had come from being a porn star for a long time to now stripping at Deja Vu. And by this time, she had plummeted. She was not even pretty. You know, they had a motto at Deja Vu: we got 99 beautiful girls and one ugly one. And that was the sign that would sit out in front of it. And so I was, you know, I bet she was, you know. But anyway, I was telling her, you know, I said I need some pills. And she's like, well, I don't have any pills, but I do have some heroin. And I'm like, nah, man, I don't want that. And the other stripper I was dating, she liked it. And so she's like, well, why don't you try it? And so I did. And I'll never forget it. What happened to me the first time I did it, it took away not just the stomach pain, but there was a euphoria to it at this time around. Mind you, I had done it before, but it never bothered to really, remind me of what it felt like, And so just the euphoria and everything that took over, that was it for me. Next thing you know, we're buying it every other day, just still having fun, but, I'm getting bags. I get hooked up with a GD from Chicago, and that's my territory. And so, next thing you know, the dope dealers, my best friend, and we're like this, and because of our gang ties and all that stuff, that follows you everywhere you go. Those ties follow you everywhere you go, everywhere. Especially if you're a sanctioned gang member, that's important, So now I'm getting it for next to nothing, and I made it about 6 months snorting it, do a little bit, do it like that, and then after about 6 months, my girl tells me, she says, we're spending a lot of money doing it this way. And I said, I'm not putting anything in a needle if that's what you think I'm gonna do. And she's like, I'm just saying, we're spending a lot of money, like $150 a day now, and it's not doing the job that it was doing before. And so we battled back and forth for maybe a month over this. And finally I gave in, was like, forget it, let's do it, And so she does it, and we do it, and I now realized I think I found what I was looking for. I'd never experienced a high like that in my life. And now at this point, from this point forward, any drug I ever did had to go in a needle. It was almost as if I had reached what they call the point of no return. When you reach that. And so for the next couple years, I'm hardcore battling this heroin addiction. I'm robbing, stealing, I'm doing everything under the sun, taking advantage of every person, place, and thing I could. And I just, I lost it. And so this sent me on a journey of running from myself with a heroin addiction. I ended up getting into a horrible car accident. I blacked out. I had taken a cab from Menominee, Wisconsin, all the way back to Minneapolis, Minnesota, after getting arrested in Wisconsin. And they put me on probation, let me go a week later. I robbed the cab company to get me back to Minnesota. I made it up in the apartment complex. I got into it with the girl that I was with. She didn't want nothing to do with me anymore. I didn't want nothing to do with her anymore. But mind you, I haven't had dope in a week too. So I was dope sick still, week later. I stole her car, stole some money out of her purse, hit my dealer. I wake up in St. Paul Regional Hospital, downtown St. Paul. I'm strapped to a bed, and I'm in nothing but my boxers. And I remember stripping out of this bed, and I jump up, and there's a bunch of doctors and nurses, and I'm freaking out. And they're like, "Sir, you need to lay down. You've been in a horrific car accident." And I look over, and they had cut my clothes off of me and everything, had them all sitting off to the side. And I'm like, "No, I need to get out of here. You gotta let me sign out and get out of here." I had so much anxiety. And so the doctor came in because I was so irate and made me sign out. I sign out. I realize I have somebody else's phone on me. And I'm thinking in my head, and I'm like, what happened? I know I went and got dope. They must not have found it on me. They checked all my clothes. They had all my stuff, even my IDs, everything was laid out of my pockets. But I remembered buying 4 bags of heroin. But now I'm in front of St. Paul Hospital, completely blank. Don't know what just happened. Had this other phone. I remember calling the girl that I was staying with, my girlfriend, And she's cussing me out, you know. I
just
stole her car.
and just, yeah, okay.
I just robbed her car, robbed $300 out of her purse.
Yep.
And now she doesn't know where I'm at. She'd been looking for me. Now it's 8 o'clock in the morning next morning.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm telling her, I'm like, look, I don't know where the car is. I don't know what happened. I'm standing in front of St. Paul Hospital, and I feel completely sober. It was kind of a weird state of feeling that I was in, like completely sober. So I wasn't sick, I had no anxiety, and I was just like, this is weird. But I knew it had to have been because I had done some heroin. Well, apparently, I had stole her car and veered off the road on, I think it was 94, going to St. Cloud, and I wrecked the car. And the reason I found this out is because I called the ambulance station in St. Cloud, and they were like, yeah, we picked you up and brought you to the hospital. And they said, your car is at a dealership, you know, down the road. So I call and I find out where the car is. And I call her and tell her she can go pick up the car down at this dealership. She goes to the dealership. I'm like thinking, oh man, thank God we found this car, right? And she calls me back, cussing me out. It's totaled, it's wrecked, what did you do? And I'm like, I don't know. And I guess, you know, I had blacked out, and I wrecked the car. And so I'm searching my pockets, and I'm like, there's no way they would have released me from the hospital having heroin on me. And sure enough, I find it in my pocket. I'm like, holy cow. You know, they didn't find any of it. They just let me walk out of the hospital. No cops were called, nothing that, you know, complete weird. You know, I still look back now and I'm like, what happened?
Yeah, yeah.
I still have
Not
no
even an interview
recollection.
for a single car accident. You'd think they'd file a
Nothing.
report for
No
insurance
report,
purposes. Nothing.
No nothing.
Wow.
Ambulance took me to the hospital. Apparently a dealership picked up the car, and it was like, that was it. And I'm like, wow. So mind you, I'm calling my mom. Now at this time, my grandmother has multiple myeloma. She's sick. And she has
The one who's raised you.
Yes.
Yeah.
She has bone cancer. And so it's a very sad moment in my family at the same time, because my grandmother is about to pass away, and my mom ends up selling some things, getting me a ticket. You know, I go back to my apartment. I tell the girl I'm staying with, hey, I'm out of here and I'm not coming back. And she didn't believe me, but I pack my bags up. I get in the cab, I get on the bus, and I'm gone. I go back to Illinois because my mom's back in Illinois now. And so I'm living with her. I'm there for a couple weeks. My grandmother passes away. At this point in time, my mom decided she was going to get a hold of some family that lived down in Florida, Tampa, Florida. And so she ends up buying a house down in Florida, or renting a house, and I move with her down to Florida. And mind you, I'm still addicted at this point. My mom is also now addicted. And she had had medical issues where with her back that caused her to have to take, you know, medication. But she took a drug called tramadol, which was like an opiate mimicker. And they were trying to substitute it for opiates at that time. Come to find out, it was more addicting than any opiate they were giving people. So it's not even, it's rarely you can even come across it.
What a
anymore.
shock.
I mean, it was so bad doctors were writing their own scripts for this stuff. It was a bad time with this stuff. And so she's just feeding me these things, and, you know, we're just kind of keeping each other kind of both in this mess. And I get to Florida, some pills get stolen from my mother. At this point, the guy my mom was with was also taking them from my mom. So it was a whole mess of drug addiction going on in my house, you know. And a couple months go by, and I get kicked out of the house because pills end up missing. I end up on the streets of Tampa, Florida. I'm not going to go into that story because that's its own story, but I got locked up in Tampa, caught a case that led me to go to jail. I caught probation, get out. I decided to leave Florida, and I had a cousin who lived out here in Colorado Springs. This is where it starts to get interesting. So I come out here to Colorado Springs to see my cousin. I stay with my cousin. I'm here for about 6 months. I get into some trouble out here. Didn't last long. And they run my name. I got a fugitive warrant from Florida for absconding. And so I sit in El Paso County Jail for about 3 weeks. U.S. G7 officers came, picked me up, extradition officers picked me up. 3-day trip down to Tampa, Florida. I get to Tampa. I purposefully violate my probation, decide to go to prison. Now at this time, they have a point system for the prison system down in Florida, and they tell you, well, we won't score you out for your cases in Illinois. We don't give you points. But then by the time I get to court, they have me pointed out for my Illinois cases. So that led me to have like 44 points, which means I go straight to prison. I don't do county time. And so, because now at this time I'm a registered gang member, so you get locked up in the prison system, they have registered gang members locked up, filed away in the systems and stuff. And so I get sent to a level 7 gang camp down in Florida, Jackson Correctional Center in Florida. It's pretty much a disciplinary camp for people who get in trouble in prisons, other places, and this is where they send me, straight there, all lifers. These guys ain't got nothing to lose. The only thing they're doing is going back to court, giving time back and coming back, but still have a life sentence in 70 years. These are the guys that, I end up with. The judge gave me 5 years for possession of narcotics, because that's what the charge was. 2 Xanax pills, they gave me 5 years, felony F5 in Florida. And because I scored out, they gave me the full sentence. And so because I had time in county already, they add that to it. And so I end up doing maybe 2 years in Jackson Correctional. And got some interesting stories from in there too, with the gangs and stuff, because of my ties to Chicago, put me in a position to where, now I'm in prison having to be affiliated with certain activities that go down in prison because I'm guilty by association.
Sure.
So, or you can drop your flag and all that, there's a whole exit strategy from that, but not me, and I feel superior too now, mind you. I'm sanctioned out of Chicago. And so I get out of prison, I go back to Illinois again, and I proceed to end up taking a school offer at a culinary school, because I've been cooking my entire life, because that's the only jobs you can get when you're running the streets like that. Everybody needs a cook, especially a good one, and I was a darn good cook. So, I end up going to culinary school, and it takes me back up to Minnesota. So now I'm journey back to Minnesota, right? Totally dropped the bomb at culinary school. They end up shutting down the school anyway, but mind you, I get right back hooked up with my old dope dealer in Minnesota. And I didn't start using right away, but it didn't take long, and maybe a few months in, and I'm back at it. And so I get a hold of my grandma's family, who passed away out in New Jersey, and Cinnamon's in New Jersey. My great-grandmother's still alive at this time. She's 94 years old. And so I get to contact my great aunts and uncles out there, and they proceed to help me get a ticket out there. Now at this time, I'm not only shooting dope. The thing about doing that is you can come across programs where that'll give you methadone and Suboxone.
Right.
And so now the drug addicts running around with Suboxone strips for the times that they can't get any dope. And it's to help you with the withdrawals, but it doesn't necessarily get you high, but you don't get sick. And so by the time I get out there, I had kind of weaned myself down to where I was just kind of trying to take Suboxone, because I was freaking out all over again that this had just happened to me, like all over again, a just ongoing thing. And so I move out to New Jersey, get a job out there, staying with my great grandma, and meet a guy who I worked with at Red Apple, and we end up going down to Camden, New Jersey. And he's like, yeah, I want you to meet some people, man. You're a cool dude, I want you to meet some people.
Camden's a rough area.
So we go to Camden, mind you. I ran around Chicago, most of my life. And even when I wasn't in Chicago, I was always in Chicago.
Right.
So your ties keep you connected to the city. It's what we call pipelines. And so you don't ever lose your pipelines. If you cannot mess that up and you can keep those ties to the land, then you're set. no matter where you go. You know, I can come back, get a quick buck real quick, go back wherever I'm living if I need to, or link up if we got a sanction out there, which all 50 states got them now, sanctions out of Chicago. And so you got little Chicago everywhere you go. You know, we're virus. They spread like virus on purpose, you know, on purpose too. And so I end up in Camden, New Jersey. I'll never forget it, coming into the city for the first time and nothing but abandoned buildings.
Yes.
And I'm like, what is this place?
Yeah, I worked in Philly
Are we in a third world country?
Yeah.
By this time, mind you, I had become sanctioned, which means you go through, you enter into the realm of the spirit realm, which gives you kind of unique abilities to manipulate your way around the streets. And so when you learn how to invoke certain things, it kind of gives you what we call a third eye. That's what we call it in the gangs, even third eye. Now I come to find out we actually have a third eye. You know, like what they consider a third eye in the mockingbird area of our brains or whatever.
Yeah, pineal gland.
Yeah, pineal gland. You're right. I figured that out later on down the road. But you know, we as gang members, you know, we're being taught things that are ancient, like ancient knowledge stuff. Like, I didn't find this out until I come across a lot of what Skywatch was doing, and I started putting a lot of pieces together that was like, oh my goodness, this is way bigger than I thought it was, you know. And but anyway, those things I have with me while I run these streets, you know. And I seem to think for a long time that that's what had kept me alive, my ability to manipulate the streets like I did. Later come to see Jesus had just been saving me my entire life and doing something with me. I like to call him the crimson cord of my own Old Testament. You know, I can look back now that I'm saved and see Jesus was there the entire time.
Well, to kind of move into the last leg of this interview.
Okay.
How did you get saved? I mean, because this sounds like a repeat cycle of get in trouble, get out, hook up with somebody else you used to know, back into the drugs, back into the destructive behavior, and then back into trouble again. So what broke that cycle?
So by this time, Camden, from the first minute I stepped foot there, you know, and the first bag I bought of heroin, I was there every day, nonstop. Now, it's the cheapest you'll ever find. It's some of the purest dope you'll ever find. And every corner's selling it. Every corner.
Yeah.
And the cops are sitting right there watching this stuff go down.
What's sad is that Philadelphia, which was in rough shape when I was there 35 years ago, there's a YouTube channel out there now that drives slow through like Kensington and shows the people walking along the streets like zombies.
Right.
I mean, it looks like the zombie apocalypse on the streets of Philadelphia right now. Camden was rough then. I've not seen it since 1988. But
and this is, I want to say 2015, 15 by now.
Yeah, and I certainly
15
when I was
got
there,
out 14, so 2015.
So, and I will add this: that when I was there in Philadelphia, I was not walking this way. I was working in Top 40 Radio at the time, so I was not. I was promoting a lifestyle that later, when our daughter was born, I did not want her living.
Right.
Songs that I was promoting when I got to St. Louis as a program director on a Top 40 station.
Oh, okay.
I was choosing the songs that we put out that later I didn't want my daughter listening to. So, I was not sensitive to what was going on there. But even in your state, you say you felt a darkness.
Oh, absolutely. I had found myself from a very young age being very sensitive to the spiritual stuff, the spirit realm, to be exact. And what I mean by that is you have the ability through certain things and certain criterias to be able to influence people, to be able to influence your surroundings, and to be able to kind of put placeholders on locations, like different geographical locations and stuff like that.
It's what we would call witchcraft, sorcery.
Yes, absolutely. Sending, conjuring.
Yes.
Yes. And the placeholder stuff is a lot harder to get into. It's once you get there, you've gone really deep.
Yeah.
Magus wizards, that level. I wasn't by on paper by sanction that level, but I had reached that level, if you know what I mean.
So
There is what's called a fast track.
So Camden pulled you deeper down.
Pulled me deeper down in. Now at this time, I had run into some of the purest cocaine I'd ever seen in my life. And it was the cheapest I had ever seen in my life. And so I was like, why not have fun with that, you know? And I'd never done a speedball before. So now I'm mixing the two. A couple months go by, I can't have one without the other now. So
This loses its effectiveness. Your body builds a tolerance to it, and you need more.
well, not only that, like if I don't, like, because heroin's a physical addiction.
Right.
This is why people stay hooked. And really the 1% of the 1% make it out from this level, you know, of this deep of a rabbit hole. This is why I could say God was all over this. Yeah, so if there'd be days where it's like, okay, I have to get the heroin first. I only got enough for that. And well, after a while, I would find myself even getting anxiety and sick from not having the cocaine either. And so now I found myself, for some reason, I didn't think that cocaine was ever a physically addicting drug. Never had that. Never even seen that really a thing.
I'm old enough to remember that those were the lies that were told to people back in the 70s.
Yeah.
The question
Okay.
isn't why people are taking cocaine. The question is why everybody isn't taking it. Because
Right.
it's a great high and it's not addictive. This was back in the 70s. I
can
remember
sleep it
seeing
off.
those articles. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but at this time, because of the way that I was,
yeah.
the way that I was doing it, mind you, everything has got to go in a needle at this point in my life. I'm at the point of no return. So once I met that needle, everything I ever did drug-wise went in that thing, whether it was pills, whether it was, you know, Suboxone even. I mean, I was so sick at one time, I was cutting Suboxone strips and dissolving them and doing those. Yeah, I mean, and I still to this day don't even know anybody that's ever even done that, you know, but I figured that out, you know, and, but it had led me, it led me to an abandoned building. I was at the complete end of myself at this point. I was about to get high. I'm in this building and I just break and I start crying and I got this needle in my hand and I'm thinking, and I'm like, this can't be happening. I'm stuck. I'm done for. And so I cried out and I said, Jesus.
Because you're about 30 years old at this point.
I am 29.
Okay.
I said, Jesus, if you're real, if you're the God that my grandmother says that you are, if you're the God that can save lives, then you'll come into my life right now and save me because I want to die. I just want to die. And I got that out and I got high and I proceeded to walk out of that abandoned building and I go to turn left to hit the last bus back to Cinnaminson because if you don't catch these buses, you're stuck in Camden overnight.
Yeah.
And that had happened too many times and I hated being stuck there, you know. And so I'm trying to jet to this bus stop and I look over to the left, right in the middle of the hood, and there's about 5-6 people right there just kind of talking to people. And I'm like, and then I see some people just kind of praying and I'm like, oh no, you know, it kind of spooked me real quick because I just had this like coming to Jesus moment, you know, and that was freshly playing in my head as I walk out this abandoned building. And so I try to ignore him and I turn to the right and what looked like the pastor comes running out after me and he's like, come here, let me just talk to you for a second. And I'm like, okay. And so he leads me over to the middle of this circle, people laying hands on me and praying for me. I had a little old lady next to me. It looked like my grandmother. I'll never forget it. And my grandmother spoke in tongues, you know, and I always thought that was weird, but this lady was speaking in tongues, and I'm like, it sounded like my grandmother was, and I'm like, I'm freaking out. Mind you, I don't feel anything, though, because I'm completely high at this point. And they get done, and I tell the pastor of the ministry, I said, look, I missed my last bus back to where I live. Can you give me a ride? And so he takes me back there. Well, at this particular time, my aunt had probably, I know, had reached the last straw with me. She says, we can't do this anymore, you know? Well, I just so happened to show up with this pastor at the door. I come walking in the front door and my aunt is screaming at me, yelling at me, and she had never done this since I lived there. This had never happened between us. And this is how I knew this was the end, whatever that was gonna look like, I knew right when I walked in that door. And she had called my great uncles and stuff, and so now they were here and everything, and so they kind of had this moment where, you know, they were yelling at me like, you got to go, you got to go. And now I'm crying, I'm bawling, I'm like, I am so sick, and I'm just so lost. And for 2 weeks up until this point, I had been looking for rehabs all over the place. Nothing less than $50,000 out of pocket. I got no insurance, I got no money. There's no help for us on the East Coast like that. And so I'm crying. Well, my uncle comes to me and he's like, you know, I had a friend that his son went to a discipleship program called U-Turn for Christ. And this was in Tennessee. He said, but I think they have them all over. And he says, I believe you can look it up online. And it was almost as if, as soon as he started telling me this, hope just like bled into me. And I hadn't even known what was happening yet or what he was about to say, but it was almost as if like I stopped crying and it was like my attention was grabbed. And so I got online and I found they had one in Colorado Springs. Now, I'd been here one time before, dreamed about coming back to this place if I ever got an opportunity because I loved it here. The mountains are so beautiful. I mean, it's so majestic, you know, especially for someone like me who ran cities, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Us Chicago boys, we don't see mountains.
No.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, you know, not like no. It's cities and cornfields.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it. You know, that's the Midwest.
Right.
And it's funny because you'll come through a cornfield and I'm in Rockford. Oh, I'm in a city.
Yeah, right.
I'm
and
in
more
Peoria.
Like, Freeport.
Oh,
Okay,
Freeport. Yeah. Yeah. So that's Illinois or Midwest anyway. All Midwest really, you know. And so I got online and found this program in Colorado Springs, U-Turn for Christ. I called the program and I said, okay, what's it going to cost? And they're like, well, we don't charge anybody. We take donations. And I said, oh, okay. And they said, well, it's $1,000 donation to get in the program. I'm like, oh, man. Well, my great-grandmother, mind you, she's in there. My great-grandmother died of paranoid schizophrenic. She went through all type of shock therapies, you know, during like the wars and stuff like that. They were doing pretty, I think, evil stuff to women back then. And she was a product of that. My great-grandfather built fighter planes in World War II. Mm-hmm. And so all military, very strict, hard guy, you know. But anyway, I hear my grandmother in the background saying, get him what he needs. Get him the help he needs. I'll pay for it. Whatever. I don't care. And so, but my aunt's like, well, it's like $1,000. She's like, I don't care. Get him the help he needs. And so 2 days later, I was on a bus to Colorado Springs to this discipleship program called U-Turn for Christ. And I have never looked back. Now, mind you, when I got here, I'm still lost. I'm still trying to find myself, but I know God just saved me. I know it at this point when he gets me here. I go through the most intense withdrawal I'd ever experienced in my life. You know, I'm coming off heroin, Suboxone, methadone, Oxycontins, because my aunt, and cocaine.
All at once.
All this.
Oh my.
Yeah. I mean, they're not all done. The only two that are done at the same time, obviously, is the cocaine and the heroin.
Yeah, right.
You know, for a particular cocktail. You know, but all that's in my system because, mind you, this is the stuff that keeps you going in between. So you got the methadone program going. You got your Suboxone strips to make sure you don't ever get sick.
You're going through the withdrawal of all of these things at the same time.
So Suboxone and methadone particularly, seeps into your bone marrow. So when you go through withdrawals from methadone, it seeps out of your bones. And so you'll go through the initial physical withdrawal, and then you'll go through sometimes maybe another 30 days of it coming out of your bones. And it's even more painful because now it's a bone, you can't do anything about bone pain.
Right.
You can't do anything about any of the withdrawals, mind you. I mean, you can take things to help with your blood pressure, whatever, you know, to help with
endure.
That's it. But it's, you know, you're not sleeping, mind you. I didn't sleep for 15 days when I got here. And it was excruciating pain. And 9 days in, I was finally able to kind of get out of the bed. They gave me enough, they let me kick. I mean, this program has a 3-day grace period. I mean, I had a 15-day grace period. You know, that's how bad it was. They knew, they were even concerned. They were worried, like, you know, should we take this guy to the hospital? You know, it was so bad. But because they can't do anything for you. You just got to throw me in a room and let me kick. And I'll never forget it. 9 days in, I finally was able to make it to a church service for the first time. And it just so happened to be a men's conference that was going on at Calvary Worship Center. And this was the main church that we would attend in the program, but we would clean that church twice a week, along with a couple of other churches in town and Castle Rock and stuff. Mm-hmm. And we would travel to all the different Calvary churches from Canyon City and all over. You know, that's kind of what U-Turn did. We gained a lot of connections. It helped pay for the organization, and, you know, it helped with all that stuff. And so, but in the meantime, I'm 9 days in, I'm at this men's conference, and there was a particular pastor that was speaking at this time. He had had a lisp, but he was the most entertaining, most, on fire for Jesus, most charismatic. I'll never forget, I was on the front pew, and I'm dripping sweat, and I'm like, there's a pile of sweat under me, and I don't feel anything. I'm like totally captivated in this sermon. And I'll never forget that, because I had been praying, you know, God keep me, God keep me. Because you can walk out of this program at any time. You're not locked in. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not prison, it's not an institution, it's not mandated. It's voluntary, you know? And so I would stand at the front door and I would pray, like, God, just keep me, Lord. I want to leave so bad, I want to leave. And where the program was not a good area either. It was another kind of little hood area in Colorado Springs, you know? And so that was interesting too, you know? But it was that sermon that I heard 9 days in that catapulted me to go through the whole next, you know, week and a half of no more sleep and the withdrawals and stuff. And so 15 days in, I finally got some sleep. After 30 days, I was able to climb the incline, which was a whole nother pinnacle moment for me in my life. Quoting Philippians 4:13 the whole way up, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I ended up graduating this program. There's 2 phases. The first phase is 2 months in-house. Second phase is 6 months. And you can get a job. But you got to continue to attend the Bible studies, continue to go to the groups like you're supposed to, continue to do the stuff you're supposed to with the program.
How many guys make it through?
It's, I think it's better now because the program has moved to Florence. So they have a ranch and everything out there, and I hear the success rate has gone up.
A little more difficult to just walk off and walk into trouble.
But, you know, it's also one of those places that is a revolving door for people, you know. I was just...
Because I don't have a frame of reference for how difficult it is to get past that kind of an addiction.
Sure.
I've never been...
try to think about... People use the term, the flu times 10. I don't like to use that term.
Yeah.
Because it's not the flu. You might have like sneezes and symptoms that look like flu symptoms, but it's not the flu. It's your brain is not firing. Your receptors are blocked. Your body goes into shock. It's just straight shock, you know. You're from shaking to, you know, and like I said, this was intense. It was a good 15 solid days of this. Yeah. You know, but it got a little better over time.
And you graduated then, and that began your reintegration into...
Yes. I now was attending Calvary Worship Center faithfully. I ended up marrying the secretary of Calvary Worship Center.
Wow.
Yes. Now, that's a weird thing because my grandmother, when I was younger, used to tell me when I was a child, you're going to be a pastor one day. You're going to marry a woman in the church. And I'd be like, yeah, okay, Grandma.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you bring back to her because you talk about her early on.
Yeah.
And her bringing you to church,
yes.
Speaking in tongues, praying over
yes.
you.
Yeah.
How much do you think that helped protect you through your journey through
How much?
The depths, and then, you know, the
Entirely.
fact that you had a warrior grandmother praying for you, leading the Lord to allocate protectors who were with you even in those dark hours.
She would talk about angels protecting me. She would talk about supernaturally seeing things that over my bed, I have messages from her on Facebook that I cherish, because she would talk about, just things protecting me, angels, fire shooting out their back. And she would say things like, now we see, Shawn, now we see why you have such an angel so big protecting you. And, we all thought she was cuckoo, even my mom. I mean, my mom especially. And so I got my mom telling me, your grandma's a little, she's not all the way there. Mind you, neither is your great-grandmother, because she's schizophrenic, you know what I'm saying? Well, I believe there's a lot of things that bled into the reason for that, though.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother, neither here nor there.
Well, we've been talking for a while here, and again, I want to keep this to a manageable length.
Yes.
So let's put a wrap on this.
Sure.
At this point in your life, you're out, you're working in the world, you're married, and you're wanting to bring a message to the world based on your experience. So if you got a message that you want to convey right now, and we'll talk again and we'll dig deeper into some of the things you've experienced in the supernatural warfare, the influence of people like Russ Dizdar on your life. But the message to the people who are watching this, who may see this or hear this and be blessed by it, what message can you share right now that you want to convey?
Don't give up. Don't lose hope. Keep seeking Jesus, even when you fall down. Because the Lord's grace is sufficient for all of us. It doesn't matter where you've been or what you've done. God loves you, and He wants the best for you. And He will allow you to slip, stumble, and fall over and over again because He loves you. Just keep getting up, keep picking up your cross daily, keep seeking Jesus, keep reading your word, and build your relationship with Him. Nothing could break the bond of the relationship that I have with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, today. And that's because He showed Himself time and time again to be true and to be real in my life. And so if there's one thing I can say more and encourage more is, one, don't forsake fellowshipping with the brothers and sisters of the body. I want to say that because even more so in these last days, it's going to be so vital and so important for us to have this accountability in our lives. And but love God with all of your heart, mind, and soul. Have no other gods before Him, and love your neighbor as yourself. And this is what's given me the ability to grow. Grace. Jesus is a grace place, and He's a place that you can go in your darkest moments or in your best moments of life, the peaks and in the valleys. He is there, and He is with you, and He is guiding you, and He will strengthen you in your process of growth. He's continuing to sanctify us, and we have not arrived. None of us have arrived. What Jesus does for us is it gives us the ability to live life for what we were meant to live life for. And that's to worship our Lord and Savior and to exude that love and that grace and mercy to one another in these last days. And so that's what I can encourage you is don't give up. Don't give up. I wanted to so many times give up, and I just would hear just keep going to Jesus, keep going to Jesus. I'd slip, stumble, fall. I might stumble back into sin. Not so much today as in the beginning. It's a process. You're not going to get it right away. You're going to fall. You're going to stumble. But 7 times 70, the Lord says.
Yeah. And 70 being a number in the ancient world that means
complete.
Complete. All of them. Every last one.
Yes.
Not one left out. Shawn, where do people follow you? Where can they connect with you?
So I attend Calvary Worship Center here in Colorado Springs. I am on the worship team over there and on the prayer team over there. So you can see me there, 501 Castle Road. Great place if you're here in the Springs, if you're looking for a church or you're looking for a congregation to do life with. We do life together over at Calvary Worship Center. That's where God has me at this moment. That's where God has grown me in this time. Other than that, Facebook, Shawn Rae.
All right.
SHAWNRAE.
I'll put a link in the notes, whether you're watching this on YouTube or the Gilbert House app or wherever else you find this program, A View from the Bunker. You'll find a link to where you can follow Shawn Rae, and we will continue to stay in touch and be blessed.
Thank you, brother.
By your testimony and inspired. And we thank you for watching. Hang on. Details on our Israel and Turkey tours coming up as A View from the Bunker continues. Jesus told his followers to love our God with all of our hearts, souls, and minds. And that's what we try to do every week here at Gilbert House Ministries. This program is an outreach of our ministry. Every week, we search through the mysteries of end times prophecy on Unraveling Revelation. We look at the nexus of science and the supernatural on Sci Friday. We study the Bible verse by verse in chronological order at the Gilbert House Fellowship. And each week, I interview fascinating guests on my podcast, A View from the Bunker. Producing that much content takes time. Serving up that much audio and video costs money, and so we depend on your support. You can support us in a couple of ways. First, you can donate through our website at gilberthouse.org, or you can contact us through the U.S. mail. Gilbert House Ministries, P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri 65633. And you can shop at our online store, a sort of a virtual book table, where during the month of June, you can save 20% on every one of Sharon's 7 novels in her series of supernatural thrillers, The Red Wing Saga. Just use promo code JUNE20 at checkout. That's June20. We are grateful for your help in fulfilling our mission. We thank you for your prayers and your support.
Talking the walk from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online at VFTB.net, on YouTube, youtube.com/Gilbert House. That's where you'll find all of our video content at YouTube. But better yet, find everything that we do at our mobile app. Tell you more about that in just a minute. Social media at View from Bunker or at Derek Gilbert on Twitter. Facebook, the page is View from the Bunker, and the new social media sites, Truth Social, Gab, MeWe, Getter, Parler, all of those you'll find me at Derek P. Gilbert, where the P is for Paul. Our new mobile app, the Gilbert House mobile app, is available, and it is free, works on iOS, Android, and Amazon Kindle Fire phones and tablets. And this gets you all of our video content, these weekly interview programs, as well as Unraveling Revelation. Every single episode of Unraveling Revelation, we're up to 140-something now. Sci Friday, we've got new episodes coming out of Sci Friday. Those are going there as well. And we're also bringing out, of course, you've got all of our Gilbert House Fellowship Bible studies going back to Genesis 1:1. At least the second time through, we've got all of the older episodes at gilberthouse.org, but each new episode is posted by about midday on Sunday. You'll get those on our mobile app, and classic episodes of PID Radio now going up on the app as well, which is not just for mobile devices, but you can get it in the Roku channel store and also the channel store, the app store for Apple TV. So the audio versions of the old PID Radio. In fact, we just posted an episode where we interviewed Tom Horn for the first time. That episode has not been available on the internet for probably 10 years. We've moved a few times, and we've had to change hosting companies a couple of times, and not all of those old files made it back to the internet. So the interview from September of 2005, where we interviewed Tom Horn for the very first time, now available at the Gilbert House app and Roku and Apple TV. You'll find the links at gilberthouse.org. Check the menu bar there for the links for the app stores and for Roku. Well, what to talk about in the news? The January 6th hearings opened up just the other night, and I'm just going to touch on this again. Nobody who isn't already a hardcore Democrat believes that these hearings are anything other than a show trial. Independent voters, of course, Republicans, Trump supporters. I'm not counting the never Trumper Republicans. Let's say Trump supporters already know coming in that this is a sham. It is a dog and pony show. Independent voters are not going to be convinced. Nothing new came out Thursday night, Friday night that revealed anything that wasn't already disclosed in previous testimony before Congress. But the thing is, this hearing, this committee really has overstepped its constitutional authority because Congress can investigate for determining the impact, the effects of legislation that is about to pass. It doesn't have the authority under the Constitution to investigate crime. That's the purview of the Justice Department. So setting aside the fact that this is all being done for political purposes, it's not even constitutional. I'm not sure the Constitution means much in the United States anymore. Essentially, our elected leaders of both parties, I might add, because this has been ongoing for a while. I mean, George W. Bush was a big fan of the signing statement. Barack Obama put it to really good use, too. Clinton started it. Paul Begala, one of his advisors, very famously was quoted as saying, "Stroke of the pen, law of the land, kind of cool," which is not how our government is supposed to run. The president is not supposed to exercise that kind of authority. But because our elected representatives in its constitutional republic don't want to take responsibility for actually governing, they let the president get away with whatever he wants to get away with. Because it's easier to assign blame than it is to take responsibility, which is what Congress is supposed to do. Anyway, what they're doing right now, again, is just a show trial to try to bring January 6th, and according to the way the media is portraying this, the day that brought our democracy to the brink of peril, the brink of disaster. That's a literal headline, I think, the New York Times, which, first of all, is ridiculous, because none of those people were armed. Secondly, this isn't a democracy. I quoted the New York Times line on Skywatch TV, 5 and 10 daily news update commentary, really, this past week, and somebody got upset that I didn't clarify that we are not living in a democracy. I understand the difference. I know there's a difference. I was repeating their line and then did not see fit to clarify it, but the point is well made. We don't live in a democracy for the very reason that we're seeing right now. The framers of the Constitution understood that living under mob rule, which is essentially what a democracy becomes, is a bad idea. We elect representatives and try to vote for the ones that we believe are most qualified to represent our interests at the federal level and let them vote on stuff. We're not supposed to make every election a popularity contest, which is what progressives want right now. Until they get it and until popular opinion swings back in the other direction, in which case then they want to impose laws to restrict free speech, as is the case now in New York. This past week, Monday, Governor Hochul proudly announcing that in New York State, social media companies have to report to the state government what they're doing to combat, to track and report hateful behavior. Put that in air quotes, hateful behavior, because what's hateful to one is just plain truth to another. But this is the world in which we live today. Progressives are the fascists that they claim to hate. Anyway, this January 6th commission is nothing more than a show to try to bring something to the public's attention to get our minds off of the fact that the price of gasoline is now over $5 a gallon, average. It was predicted it would hit $5 before July 4th, and here we are with a couple of weeks to spare. We're not even to the peak summer travel season yet. That's really around the 4th of July. So it's only going to get worse. So Democrats are desperate to find something, anything, that they can run on in November, because right now running on Biden isn't Donald Trump isn't really scoring well when we remember that, oh yeah, under Trump, gasoline was half this expensive and we could still get baby formula. So this will be interesting to watch, to see how they present it. I don't think it's going to change anybody's minds, but the media is going to do their darndest. Saw a report yesterday that 20 million Americans, they say, 20 million Americans watched the hearings on TV. A number of networks carried it, and 20 million of us, supposedly, watched the programming. Now, bearing in mind that when we look at network viewership, I pulled up the Nielsen.com website. Nielsen is the company that tracks viewership for network, cable, syndicated television ratings, and streaming services as well. Okay, 20 million Americans supposedly sat down and watched the January 6th hearings, which disclosed absolutely nothing new. Thursday night. 1 month ago, actually about 3 weeks ago, the week of May 23rd, which is the most recent week for which Nielsen has the ratings posted. I mean, they don't do it for free. They charge for their services to networks, so they're not going to release the most up-to-date week. But just to give you an idea what a normal week of television viewing looks like in terms of number of Americans watching specific shows. The number one program for the week of May 23rd, was FBI on CBS with 7.1 million viewers. Young Sheldon on CBS was number 2, 7.1 million viewers. NBA playoffs on ABC, 6.8 million viewers. Number 4, Chicago Fire on NBC, 6.8 million viewers. NCIS on CBS, number 5, 6.5 million viewers. They would like you and me to believe that somehow 3 times more people tuned in to watch the January 6th Commission hearings than sat down to watch their favorite television shows in a typical week here in the United States. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I think it's a lie to convince us that this is a really big deal. In the words of the New York Times or AP or whoever it was that put out that headline about the day that brought America's democracy to the brink of disaster. It didn't. What it showed the political class in Washington, D.C. was that a lot of Americans, are really frustrated and angry at the fact that because we've awakened and realized that our government is not of the people, by the people, and for the people anymore. And they need to squash that idea in a real hurry before they get a real insurrection on their hands. Also, one other interesting bit of news that came out toward the end of the week. The Bank of International Settlements has issued a report and declared that cryptocurrencies cannot fulfill the role of money. Now, this ignores the fact that for many people, for several years now, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and others have done exactly that. But it's not a surprise to hear this coming from the Bank of International Settlements, because this follows a previous report that predicts that that central bank digital currencies will emerge to fulfill the role of money in the near term. Central bank digital currency is like a cryptocurrency, except it's controlled by central bankers, which means if they roll it out and the United States dollar, paper money, is replaced with digital currency controlled by the Federal Reserve Bank, then every single transaction you or I make will run through the Federal Reserve Bank, meaning there is no financial privacy at that point. None whatsoever. Furthermore, a CBDC can be constructed so that purchases of certain items or types of items would be impossible. Oh, no, you can't spend your money on that kind of religious propaganda. That's hate speech. That's what's coming. This is why Guy Malone's presentation for Skywatch TV's virtual conference last fall on Bitcoin as the mark of the beast, I thought was really insightful. He argued, no, Bitcoin is not the mark of the beast because it's decentralized. The reconciliation process takes place on a loose network of unconnected, decentralized computers. A central bank digital currency takes that concept, but it centralizes the process so that all of the reconciliation is controlled by the central bank. And then it's just a short step from there for a central bank or say the World Economic Forum or the International Monetary Fund or some government authority to say, the fluctuations in values between all of these central bank digital currencies, I mean, the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan, the European Central Bank, the Federal Reserve Bank, the Bank of China, the fluctuations are just too volatile. People won't, this is really unfair to the common. We need a global digital currency controlled by the International Monetary Fund. You don't even need to believe in end times prophecy to see that one coming. So watch for that, and I suspect we're going to see it by or before the year 2025. The Go Therefore Conference, that is the next physical conference that we'll be attending, and we hope to see you there. This will be in the Dayton, Ohio area, July 29th through 31st, the last weekend of July. It's at the Harvest Revival Center in Brookville, Ohio, which is a suburb of Dayton. Sharon and I will be speaking. Sharon, I think, in our Sunday morning Bible study today, decided on her presentation. We just started into the book of 1 Samuel, and that, of course, is the story of Samuel and how he's called, and the prayer of his mother at Shiloh. When we were at Shiloh for our Israel tour back in 2019, Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat, our good friend Zev, pointed out something to us that we English speakers probably overlooked, and that is that Hannah was praying about Jesus. It's right there in the text if you read Hebrew, which most of us don't. The key to understanding the spiritual warfare nature of Hannah's prayer is it's in the Hebrew. If you have the Divine Counsel worldview and you're looking for certain words in Hebrew, like the word salvation in English is Yeshua. And in 1 Samuel 2, verse 1, Hannah prayed and said, "My heart exults in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in your Yeshua, your salvation." So I think she may be talking on the prayer of Hannah, because there's a lot more in there than that. But that was a real eye-opener. Carl Gallups was with us, and we were all just going, has that been in the Bible the whole time? Yeah, and there are a lot of things like that in the Bible that have been there the whole time. So we invite you to join us on our study every Sunday at the Gilbert House Fellowship, audio only. But if you want to see Sharon talk about that, then join us at the Go Therefore conference. Again, just did the interview with Dr. Mike Spalding, who's putting it together, Mike and Kathy, and you'll find complete information online at gothereforeconference.com. In mid-September, we'll be out in California, again, waiting for details on this one to be posted online, but September 15th through 17th, we'll be in the Sacramento area, along with L.A. Marzulli and Timothy Alberino, and keep your eye on that, because we will be telling you more as we know more. Our tour of Israel next March 19th through 30th of 2023, we will go to Shiloh, we will go to Bethel, we will go to Joshua's altar, we'll go to Gilgal Rephaim, the Sea of Galilee, and Capernaum, those areas north of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus began his ministry there, and there was a reason that he did that there. We'll also go to the Grotto of Pan and explain why that is such a historically significant place in the ministry of Jesus. And of course, we'll go to Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, the tunnels under the Western Wall, the Old City, City of David, Jordan River. You ever been baptized? If you've not been baptized, what better place? And if you just want to come in the Jordan with us and worship, well, we'll do that too. More information is online, the itinerary, and a place for you to reserve your spot. The Skywatch TV Tour of Israel, March 19th through 30th of 2023. Skywatchinisrael.com. Skywatchinisrael.com. Our tour of Turkey this fall, time is getting close. We're within about 4 months now of heading for Istanbul and then immediately to Ankara. But the sights that we will see in Turkey are absolutely mind-blowing. Check out the website, skywatchinturkey.com. You'll see the itinerary there, and you can reserve your spot for that. We're trying to keep this to 2 dozen or less, skywatchinturkey.com. And if you want to find out more and see some video from Turkey, when I put together the interview with Doug Hershey, maybe, 6 weeks back or so, you get a look at some of these sites that we will go visit. If you've not seen that, go back in the archives and look for the interview with Doug Hershey, founder of Ezra Adventures, about the tour of Turkey, skywatchinturkey.com. Thanks again for taking time out to watch or listen to this podcast wherever you're watching or seeing, whether it's at their mobile app on Roku, Apple TV, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever else you found us, which is, of course, wherever fine podcasts are sold. Give us a like at our View from the Bunker page at Facebook. Our announcer is DC Good, and The View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.